Hi, good morning. This is Damon Scott, Marketing Director here at PVBS, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning on our introduction to Microsoft Dynamics NAV for government contractors. Today we will be providing an overview of the Microsoft Dynamics NAV for government contractors. Hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about the executive dashboards, the fully integrated web time and expense system. We're going to get into the project setup, including some billing setup and managing funding. We're going to touch on some invoicing and invoice format, and hopefully we should have enough time to get into managing indirects as well. Some housekeeping to take care of real quick. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to our PVBS YouTube account. That's PVBS Dynamics NAV. If you have any questions, you can post them in the question section as we're going through this webinar, and we'll try to get to those as we go along. If we cannot get to your question today, we'll certainly contact you separately. Also later today, you should receive an email invitation to take a post-webinar survey. We really appreciate any feedback that you can offer to help make this a better learning tool for everyone. So if you don't mind, please take a few minutes and answer some questions for us. So today's agenda for this webinar includes a brief introduction of PVBS, and then we're going to jump right into a demonstration of the product. Again, if we're able to, we'll answer questions as we go along. Okay. So a little bit about PVBS. We are a top-tier Microsoft Business Solutions partner, serving only the government contracting market. Our headquarters are just outside Washington, D.C. in Reston, Virginia. Gives us a unique access and insight into the GovCon community. Also, as an experienced leader with over 15 years of success in government contracting, PVBS is a good resource for both government contractors and the Microsoft community. Now, the Microsoft Dynamics NAV for government contractors from PVBS, it's a rich, robust accounting solution, compliant with federal rules and regulations. System is certified by Microsoft and tightly integrates the critical financial management components government contractors need to manage the business. So the entire financial management workflow that government contractors require, such as general ledger, budgeting, reporting, business analytics, product accounting, and are operated from within the solution without the need for a third party or add-on components. Again, we're going to talk a lot about that with Mr. Paul Skrupski, our VP of Sales and Marketing and founder here at PVBS. Paul, welcome. I'll let you take over from here.
All right. Well, thanks, Damon. And again, welcome to everybody on the call today. You know, we're excited to introduce you to Dynamics NAV. We're going to show the 2017 version. And Microsoft, in the last, I'd say, 5 years, has done an incredible job of starting to create not only a roadmap, but execute on that roadmap of significant innovation. And that innovation has helped to drive Dynamics NAV to all new heights. So now there's over 130,000 companies using Dynamics NAV. It's used by over 2 million users worldwide. So that makes it the most widely used mid-market product in the world. This is a slide that comes from Microsoft and really highlights the areas that they focus on from vertical perspective. Microsoft doesn't sell direct to companies. They rely on partners to deliver these solutions. And Microsoft wants partners to have a vertical focus. And PVBS has been focused on government contracting pretty much from the start of the business. And we feel like we are, starting to get into some capabilities that really no one out there, across any software platform can provide. Some of those things that this slide highlights are around those kind of capabilities. So the first one you see on the left, it says, how Dynamics NAV works with Office 365. So I'm going to show folks that are on the call today, for any of you that haven't seen it, Power BI, which is the Microsoft dashboard tool. And we've pre-built a series of dashboards as well as a set of queries to pull data from NAV in real time for analysis for PMs or executives. The other thing I'm going to give you a little highlight on is the new phone app. So I'm not going to run it from my phone. I'll just show you in a browser, but you'll get an idea of the kind of things you can do from your phone today. And then the last thing that we'll highlight today is around workflow. So Microsoft has made some investments around how do you start to communicate and articulate across the enterprise with this workflow engine that can be tailored by users. So it's not something that you need to be a programmer to build things out. and I'll show you some of those workflow capabilities as part of the presentation today. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hop into the software and give you guys a little insight into what's going on in Dynamics NAV 2017. So I'm going to start out, and I know that there might be some clients on the phone today, so the first thing you're going to see is this interface looks a little bit different. And it still has what they call a role-tailored client, and the idea is based on your role in the organization, this home page gets laid out a certain way, but you see a new box on here, and it says Power BI Reports. So Microsoft has made Power BI visible inside of NAV. So I'm going to show you how I build those views, but you can see that you can interact with Power BI right inside of NAV. So everything from changing information by dates, and you can see as I change the dates, these different sections update themselves. Let me go to another report. To a report, in this case, this is like a visual project status report. Let me expand it in case people have a smaller monitor on their desk. And now it's showing you, all of your elements of cost. So I've got labor, ODCs, or I'm sorry, labor by labor category code, ODCs, indirects, profit by job, and then this is showing me labor with drill down. So I can drill into my labor cost and look at labor across all my labor category codes and all the resources that I've charged time. So each one of these little dynamics can also be filtered. So if I want to look at just a certain contract, and look at that contract vehicle, you can see that here's the two jobs or tasks being performed under there. Let me go ahead and I'm going to make this bigger. I'm going to put it into a focus mode, and same idea, where I can drill into this to get to details. You also have the ability to, if you wanted to see this with data as well as, I'm going to say I want to see data. So now I can actually see not only the people and the amounts, but I'm seeing it as a grid below. So these Power BI views can be made available inside of NAV, or they can be available from the Power BI desktop. So these are our standard views that we've defined, and for clients that want to use Power BI, we're certainly happy to provide these to you. This is similar to the one I showed inside of NAV, but it's also got unposted hours and other filters that you might set for periods, PMs, or contracts. A trended project status report. So it's showing you details about, month over month, your elements of cost, right? So I've got those, as my rows here. These can also be, resituated. So if I wanted to have my unposted labor, at a different spot, or my revenue up top, I can certainly do that. Similar idea with filters here. And then up top, I'm seeing a trend of my revenue and budgeted data. And I can have different versions of that budget. So if I look at version 1, you can see we only budgeted $4,000 for the month, but came in at 24. But on version 3, it looks like we didn't have any revenue projected for the month. So users can build multiple budgets and do budget versus actual comparison. T&M billing analysis. So this allows somebody to see both posted and unposted data, in addition to a little projection of future billings. So on a T&M project, as people are entering time, I can get visibility of the latest from that particular set of employees across certain types of projects. Then I'm seeing unposted billings by labor category code. Each one of these little sections can be filtered, and the other areas auto update. So when I look at my senior consultant labor category code, there's 3 people that have charged across that. If I look at my consultant 1 category, there's also 3 people. But you can see some of these folks, in this case, if I look at Andrew, he's got 19,000 in billings under consultant 1, and then he's got an additional, it looks like about 6,000 under another labor category code. So it's interactive from that perspective. Same idea, if I wanted to know which ones Andrew was under, I could also select just that particular person there. So that interactive nature can be available via Power BI inside of NAV, and there's also a web client option. And one of the things that's nice from the web client option is any of those tiles, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to expand this. any of those tiles that I showed, so I had like 6 different tabs and I didn't go through all of them, but I can pick and choose which ones I want to put on my home page. So if I'm an executive, maybe I use 3 or 4 different metrics to manage the business. I can put those on my home page, and then in real time I'm getting visibility of what's going on. If I want to see additional detail, so this is showing me revenue by location, so I'm seeing where is the revenue coming in across projects. I can see in Virginia, we're working on a cyber threat project. Up in New York, it's Project Kempster. I can drill into that, and it gets me down into the specific detail. So here are all my projects, my customers we're performing the work for, and same idea with these filters. So if I choose a filter, it just shows me details on work performance and what projects we're performing for that customer. So the thing that you're seeing is, more visualization of data, and also from an end user perspective, we've certainly seen that Microsoft has made it significantly easier for someone to create a view kind of on the fly. And what they're able to do in that regard, you see the different visualizations that are available to users, and then all of the different standard fields that are part of queries to push data over to Power BI. So Power BI, Microsoft did a little presentation recently, and they showed the Gartner Magic Quadrant. For folks that aren't familiar with Gartner, they're a research organization that, from a technology perspective, they compare technologies across all companies. And Power BI as a dashboard tool, is in the upper right quadrant, which is innovation and market leaders. And Power BI is rapidly becoming, the business intelligence product of choice. And Microsoft has it all fully integrated inside of NAV, as well as all the financial reports are available in Power BI now. So some really exciting things around that. The other thing we'll go into today, like Damon mentioned, is we'll talk about recording time and expenses. So entering time, expenses, and approval of those documents. And I mentioned this whole idea of a mobile device. So let me go ahead and we'll go over. I don't have my phone up, but you're just seeing a little picture of, looks like I lost my connection. Let me go ahead and resume my connection and just log back in here. Hold on 1 second. And let's put in my username. And I'll put in my ID. So this is, as a user, this would be your visualization from the mobile client. And you can do everything from look at your timesheet to record trip expenses. You could approve and submit PTO requests or approve other documents. And then users can have other things, other areas that they might want to get into. Any of the forms inside of NAV can be available from your mobile phone. So if I was just recording my time, I could drop into my timesheet, and it's showing me how many hours I've charged for today. If I needed to charge additional hours against a task, I could go in and record those hours against this task. If I wanted to see my timesheet for the week, I can look at my hours by day, and it's showing me how many hours I've recorded each day. So really making it easy for users, to record time and expenses without having to be back in the office, or even, connect to, go to my laptop and connect via a browser. Because more and more what we're seeing is people do everyday tasks on their phone. So this phone client, very rich experience, and we're continuing to add capabilities to that phone client. So let me go ahead and I'm going to get started with, some of the day-to-day tasks of how people are using the system. And I guess before I do that, Damon, maybe we can just pop up a quick poll and get an idea of the people that are on the call today, what systems that they're using. So we got a poll for that?
I believe I do.
Okay.
So I put this up real quick for everyone on the phone. So just to get an idea of what accounting solutions your company currently operates, whether it is Deltek, PulsePoint, Deltek GCS Premier, QuickBooks, Forecast, or something else. Paul, right now it looks like We got about 50% on cost points. I know we have some of our customers online,
Okay.
and they're coming through.
Okay, well, we'll give them about 30 minutes. So right now we've got, it looks like 40% on cost points. We've got 25% on GCS Premier, 5 on QuickBooks, and I guess the rest is on other right now.
Yeah.
So it looks like most people have voted. We got 83% that have voted. So all right, well, great. So it looks like we do have a lot of Dell Tech folks on the call today, which is great, and we're happy to show you, kind of how the other half is operating. So let me go ahead and let me jump into a job setup, and we'll talk about some of the capabilities on setting up a job and how those things are managed there. So one of the things that's nice is you've got this concept of a ribbon, so I can look at details across any of these jobs here. If I wanted to get into any one of them, I can just double click to launch that job. A couple things that you're going to notice is before I get into setting up the job, on the right-hand side, you've got information about this particular record. So everything from the status, which would be, if you think about it, instead of a project status report, which we do have a PSR, it's showing me some interactive data about this job. So I'm seeing contract and funded value, revenue data, cost data, billings, commitments, etc. Each one of these is a drill down. So if I drill into my AR balance, it shows me the detail of all the open AR against this job. It does everything from, you can see that the lines are highlighted red, which means that in this case that AR is overdue. And I'm seeing the due dates. If I need to pull up the original invoice that created that AR entry, you can see that it identifies it in the description. I would just click Show Posted Document here, and actually pulls up the original invoice. Then from here, I could, send this to a printer, or there's also an option to email it out to somebody, or maybe I just want to print it. So if I want to reprint that invoice, I could preview it right here and get all the details of that invoice. Maybe I need to resend it out to the client, either print it or send it via email. But as a user, I can quickly get to it, review it, send it as needed. If I wanted to send it off to Excel, PDF, or Word, I can also do that. So from a use perspective, the status box, you'll see it on every one of these master records, and it's an easy way to get to information. We've also added, for the latest version, the ability for users to track, FAR and DFAR clauses related to that particular project. So you're seeing that information over to the right here. Any kind of notes against a particular record. So if I want to create a new note, I just type in here to Damon, and then I could choose, we'll pretend that Damon, you are now user 3, and I want to notify Damon of whatever I typed in. I could save that, and that would send off a note to Damon to let him know of, something. And then on the home page, you can click that link, and it would drop them into that page. So that notification is a way for people to communicate. Now, before I kind of get into the job setup, I want to talk a little bit about this contract card. So the contract card is a place that you can define your different contract vehicles. So think of an IDIQ or a BPA. This is the place where I build out that contract element, what type of contract it is. I can build out contract pricing. So this would be my pricing catalog here. I can have contract contacts if needed, comments, and also documents against that contract vehicle. And then the idea is, like if you remembered earlier when we were in Power BI, if you want to do analysis by contract, I want to do a revenue analysis by contract, you can just set a filter on that contract, and it shows all of the jobs and tasks being performed under that vehicle. Other information about that job, up in the general section, I've got the job number, description, who is the client we're doing the work for. So this looks into our list of customers, who's the PM, type of contract, etc. So just some key information that you might want to track. When I go to the posting tab, this shows me information about revenue and billing formulas, And then billing pool groups is on your cost type work. If you have a method of recovering your indirects that's different than your corporate structure, you could have an example where in this particular setup I'm saying we're not able to recover G&A on travel. So I can define that, and then the system's going to be able to make sure we can automate that billing. So that setup drives those revenue and billing rules. You know, fee percent, fee amount, which would be a fee on hours, any kind of withholding. So the way to think about this is your hierarchy is you've got the contract, your IDIQ, BPA sits above the work being performed, and then beneath that I've got a work breakdown structure, or WBS. This is a 60-character alphanumeric field, and it's allowing me to define a structure that I'm using it for kind of three main things. So number one is I'm defining, you know, the levels of where contract and funding is. So in this example, I could fund at any level of the WBS. So if I fund at level 1 here, what that would mean is everything below it can use that funding. In my example, I funded at this level 2, which is the charging level, and I've got $7.7 million funded in contract value. I can drill into this. I can also make changes to it. So if I wanted to mod this, I can just come in and say mod number 8, and I'll say that it happened today. I can Control-C, Control-V. So if it was for $500,000, I didn't want to type it in, I can just quickly copy and paste that stuff, say OK, accept the change, and now you just see that that overall job just went to $11.2 million. And if I go back to that WBS, you'll see that it's now $8.2 million. So the system is going to automatically roll the stuff up, easy for you to enter and manage those mods. If you had any particular document related to the mod, you know, you can use file links, or it's got an integration with SharePoint to, you know, attach a document to this master record, and it just copies it and puts it into SharePoint for the user. So just drag and drop against the record. The second thing that the WBS is used for is, I mentioned that this level 2 in this example is a charging level. How I knew that is this was a checkbox saying visible on timesheet and expense report. It could be just one, could be both, it could be neither, in this case for the top level, which is a roll-up, but I'm always charging at the lowest level of that WBS series. That's the second thing. The thing that's nice about this is the integration with the timesheet and expense system. It's all one database. You know, so I don't need to do file uploads or refreshes. When I check these boxes, the system automatically knows it's available for time entry. And then the final thing is around membership and approvals, where I'm telling the system who can charge to it. In this example, this is my labor workforce. The labor workforce can also have visibility dates. So in my example, Sam here can only see it in September of 2017. So I don't need to remember to remove Sam. It just automatically knows that Sam can no longer charge after this visible to date. All the other users would have visibility of that task until whatever the end date of the task is. So this controls the visibility for users where there's no beginning and end date filled in. And then finally, the approval hierarchies, you know, timesheets, expense reports, purchase requisitions. That's the idea of the WBS. You know, it gives you that ability to manage those different elements. One of the elements we talked about was those funding caps. So when I go to the funding limit table, you see that the system not only created the line for, you know, the contract and funded value by WBS, it rolled it up to the overall job, and it also made an entry in this job funding limit table, you know, which is used for making sure that the system is not going to bill or recognize revenue over whatever these amounts are, but it can also be used for creating billing caps for other elements of cost. So in my example, I also have my burdens capped. In this case, the kind of burden that was capped was G&A, capped at $25,000. So you can create caps for any element of cost. So you just tell the system what type of cost it is, labor, expense, burdens, fee, or all comes from the other entries, and then it just is a hierarchy from there. So, you know, if I wanted to cap an expense, it's called materials, and then underneath materials, I've got, you know, other elements. basically a hierarchy of elements. So, and these are defined by you, so they can be simple or as complex as your business. The last piece I want to touch on is, setting up a budget for the job. So that budget, some new things that we've added, that budget can be created from actual data. So the idea would be if I wanted to look at a rolling budget, because I'm creating an ETC budget, I can tell the system, I want to create that budget from actuals for a period. So I would just tell it the starting date is maybe 1/1 through 6/30, and I want to copy this budget to, let's create a new one. So I'm going to say budget 5 is my rolling forecast. And then this would just copy that budget out to budget 5. So now all of my actuals just got copied over to budget 5 there. You could also do things where maybe you want to copy labor or ODCs. Maybe I want to spread certain costs. So the idea would be I have, $20,000 of travel costs, and I want to spread those out over periods and certain types of travel. So it just makes it easy for a user to build these things out. The wizard, helps them to automate some things that they might do manually today. We also have import-export from Excel. And then once you define your elements of direct cost, the system will, calculate what your burdens are based on that project setup. So I'd say that you've got a lot of rich and robust capabilities, from a project setup. And then the last thing I just want to touch on is alerts. And what alerts allows you to do is you can, at any level of WBS, compare your billed or spent value to funded or budgeted, and then trigger that alert out to, a PM or a task manager, or you can just hand key an email address in here, to send that alert out when this condition over here gets met. So that's a little bit about setting up a job. One of the things that I do want to touch on, because I think it's certainly a capability that helps people to become more efficient, is we've always had some copy job features, but we've added some new capabilities there. So the idea would be if you had an existing job, and I see this all the time, people have, I'm doing similar work, maybe for a different client or the same client, but I want to set up a job and I want to do it quickly. I can come in and say, I want to create a new job, and I'm going to call this 1002A, and new job. I'll choose who is the customer that we're doing it for. What is the period of performance? Click next. And now it just tells me what job do you want to copy it from. So that job that we just showed you, I can say that I want to copy, certain WBS codes, or maybe I want to just copy the whole thing. So I'm just going to copy the whole WBS setup. I can tell it, starting dates and ending dates of when I want to copy particular entries. Do I want to copy the dimensions, the T&M prices? We'll say okay, and now what just happened is we just created that new job 1002A with very few keystrokes. I just need to put in my funded and contract value, but that's simple to create that new job. So those wizards, we're really taking advantage of them to build this automation into the system. All right, so let me touch on one more setup of a job before we go into the next step in the system. The next thing I want to talk about is a T&M job. So I won't go through all the setups, but T&M is going to be a little bit different than cost type in that we're defining pricing at the labor category level. So instead of doing that buildup of cost, we've done that in our proposal, and we know that for a consultant one, effective, let's say 2017, is billing at $220 an hour. So I can build this pricing structure. It's job specific. So this is pricing for just job 2025 by labor category code and effective date. And one of the things that I like here is that this effective date can be any day of the month. So it can be in the middle of your month, in the middle of a timesheet. The system will be able to calculate the right bill amount based on the actual day time was recorded against. These T&M bill rates can be copied from your contract vehicle, so I can actually pull them from, let's just say you're doing work against your GSA schedule. I can copy that over. I can put a discount across all labor category codes, or maybe I want to discount just a certain labor category code in my setup. So I can go ahead and filter to that and set that discount for that labor category code. I can do it inside of NAV, or what you'll see is all of these forms have this ability to send data off to Excel. So I can make it easy as a user to send data to Excel. I can update in Excel, and I can copy and paste back in. And for newer versions of Excel and the newest version of NAV, you can actually operate in Excel and automatically update NAV. It still goes through all the same validation, so if I did something wrong in Excel, it's going to give me an error. But it's a nice way to interact between the two. So then, we've got our prices by effective date and labor category code. And the last thing that we have is we've got our labor category code defaults. So the idea is if a user, or I should say an employee, is entering under a different labor category code, I'm going to hide this one field. So you can hide and show fields. I wanted to make my list a little more streamlined. So what it's saying is, in this example, I've got the project management labor category code. Go ahead and filter to that value. So it currently is billing at $2.05 an hour, and my people that are working under that labor category code are Andrew and Carl. So over here is where I can identify on this job what labor category code is someone working under. So if the person's corporate labor category code was already project manager, in this case Andrew, I can see his labor category code is consultant, I wouldn't have to worry about recording that. So if it needs to be overridden, it can be overridden at the particular labor category code set up on the job. But if it doesn't need to be, you certainly could just leave it from, defaulting from their resource card. All right, so that's a little bit about job setup. Before I go over to timesheet statement, maybe get an idea of, if people are using Excel. There's some cool integration with Excel and also email, and I think it'd be good to get an idea if people are using, some of those Microsoft products today.
Absolutely. I've got a poll just threw up there as far as what Microsoft product does your company currently use. Office 365 has been around.
Oh, that's a good one to ask. Yeah,
it is. It's been around for a couple of years now. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
I got a lot of folks are moving over to that. Outlook, SharePoint, Excel, and others. Right now, polls are still coming in. Looks like about 35% on Office 365.
Okay.
Almost 90% Outlook and SharePoint.
Okay.
And Excel.
All right. Office 365 just jumped up a little bit. So we almost have everybody voted. So let's go ahead and we'll switch over. And the reason why it's good to know that is, one, this works with Office 365. So I don't need to use the desktop version of Office. You can certainly use Office 365 for the things that we're showing. And Power BI is actually a component of Office 365. So some of the folks in the call that have Office 365, they might already have Power BI as part of their setup there. All right, so the next thing now, so now we've set up a job, we've defined our billing and revenue rules, so now let's collect some time and expense. So the place I'd go to do that is, I could go to my browser. We also mentioned this idea of, recording time and expenses from a mobile phone. So I'm just going to go to my browser option, talk a little bit about some of these things. I can look up my PTO balance. I can also request time off. So if I'm somebody that needs to take a day off, so let's just say tomorrow I need to take a day off, I'd identify the period that I need, and I'm going to say I need to visit the in-laws. And you can define your own PTO category. So in my demo system, I've got just PTO. And I'll save that request. and now my approver just got notified. So Damien can go on his cell phone and approve my PTO request to be off tomorrow. And then if he did, it would just automatically go on my timesheet here. If he rejected, he could put a reason why, and I would still get notified. You can also set favorites. So the idea of favorites are, if you remember, we were inside the system, we assigned all these users to charge codes, and then that's what tells me which ones I can see. But maybe, I'm assigned, it looks like about 10 different codes, but really every week I only work on these 2. So what I did is I set those up as favorites, and I just save them. And then every time I start a new timesheet, my favorites just get dropped in for me. If I needed to add a new line, I could certainly do that. Maybe I'm working on this one task this week. And then I would just go to the day that I worked. So yesterday I put 3 hours in on this task, and I put 5 in on this, and drove new Tesla, whatever my notes are here. Hit OK, save it. That's kind of what a user is going to go through on a daily basis. Like I mentioned, they could enter time on their mobile phone and this, and it'll all, because it all goes to the same database, they can use, the 2 are kind of interchangeable for them. And then at the end of my timesheet period, I just hit my submit button. This is going to start the whole workflow approval process. When we get back into NAV, I want to talk a little bit about workflow, and I'll show you that workflow engine and how it works. But once I submit it, it kind of locks my timesheet down, and it'll notify my approvers that time is there for approval. Maybe I also had expense reports. So if I had a new expense report, I could just come in and tell the system that, I've got an expense report for that week of September 18th. Click Save, and now this creates my expense header for me here. And then from there, if I was traveling based on per diem, I could use my per diem wizard. I could just add new expense lines. Let me just kind of take you through this, and I'll create one while we're here. I can type in to this list, and it automatically filters it down for me. Or I can just pick from the list. So we'll just choose a particular location we went to. Now it's saying, all right, for that week, how long were you at that location? To save time, I'll just say I was there the whole time. We're going to charge it to this project we've been talking about this morning, and maybe this was for Go Live, I was there. And lodging, and then meals, we'll just say this was based on per diem. We'll click next. It shows me my lodging and meals and incidentals grid. Click next there, and now it's saying, okay, what did you actually pay for that room? And then if I had any unallowable amount, it would go into my unallowable bucket, and then I could code it, in terms of what kind of unallowable cost it is. Click Finish, and now it just created my expense report for me. So that's simple as a user to build that out. And then maybe I had some other costs. So let's just say that when we went there, driving to Alabama was a little too far. So see if I have, okay, it looks like I didn't have airfare as an option. So these options are defined by you. I'll just put it against materials. And I'm going to say that this expense was paid by the company card, and it was $500. I'll click Save. And then maybe we also had, I had to drive to the airport, or I took a cab to the airport instead of driving. And that cab was $50. So I'll save that. And now I've created my lines here, and this was United Air to Bama, and then cab fare on Yellow Top. I could also use my mobile to do this. Save it, submit it, we'll say OK, and now this just started that approval process. So my approver just got notified, and it can be as many as you want. I could have attached a document to it. The nice thing is as I was entering that, what you'll see is over here, that same expense report, it's right here for me. So here's that expense report that I keyed in on the web as a user, and now this just got automatically, basically because it's all in one database, it's created as I'm recording that on the fly. And then I can see from in here who's my approver. So Cindy's my approver. So if accounting sees these expense reports that aren't getting approved, they could have their own list of expense reports that are submitted and not approved. And then maybe they want to follow up with the people that are the approvers of these things to see why they didn't get approved. But I don't have to rekey anything. If I needed to recode it, I could. And then finally, turn it into a purchase invoice to pay the employee for that expense. So nice streamlined process there. So we recorded some labor earlier, and let me just go into how that labor would get approved, or I'm sorry, processed. So I'll go into the time journal. What happens is you run this function called get approved time, and what that'll do is it'll take all the time that's been approved and put it into my time journal. And then from here, you can calculate your labor distribution against it. If you're processing your payroll through a third party, we've got integration with ADP, Payroll Networks, Paychecks, and I think we recently did Paycom. In fact, ADP just announced at the Microsoft Partner Conference that they've actually built an integration with Dynamics NAV. So their HR system, they've built the integration themselves, which I don't know if ADP has built an integration to another ERP. I think this might be the first one, actually. So pretty exciting. I think ADP sees the power and the growth of Dynamics, and they're certainly getting on board there. And then the final thing would be I post that, which is going to hit the job ledger, general ledger, and the resource ledger, which is the employees. That's kind of how cost is going to flow through. We talked earlier about approvals, and let me just go into the workflow real quick just to talk about this. So there's you can create your own workflows. We've got one that we've defined for closing automation. So basically it takes you through, the steps of the closing process. It can actually automate some of those processes as well as notify people. So it can actually run functions for you. But once that process is complete, what it can do is it can do things like notify people, right? So let me go to my other one that's actually a request for approval versus automation. So let's go into this journal batch approval. And what it does is when somebody requests an approval for the journal batch, it tells the system that person that got submitted the request for approval, they've got, I guess, 1 day to approve it. If they didn't approve it, it could get delegated. You can tell the system, okay, never delegate this, or you delegate it after a certain period. Who is going to approve it? It could be an approval chain. It could be the person's direct approver, where I say every time I do something, Damon approves it. It could be the first qualified approver. You could say that there's 5 approvers for this workflow, and the first person that gets the ability to approve it or does approve it, they can do that. Or in this example, a specific approver. Those requests, Microsoft's made it now where they can get notified via an email or that notification section. So when I'm on my home page, this notification area would identify anything I need to approve, as well as it can let me know if my request was approved. So Microsoft put some really good thought into that notification process and making it streamlined for users. So we've talked about different elements of cost. So we talked about our timesheet cost, expense cost. The last actually I'm going to cover 2 more types of costs. I'm going to cover subcontract costs, then we'll cover indirect costs. So we've got a whole subcontract management function that allows you to create subcontract agreements. You can identify the type of subcontract cost. So whether it's, you've got, go ahead and pull up our options here, subcontract labor, subcontract travel, other subcontract costs. Again, these elements of costs are defined by you. So if you like to break out your subcontract costs in these 3 buckets or more, you can certainly do that, or maybe less. You just have subcontract costs. So you've got the flexibility there. Once you build out that funded value of your subcontract costs, you'll see that up in the header. When you cut POs, it becomes obligated, and then when you actually use that, it becomes expended. You can create subcontract costs also that is broken out by labor category code. So if you give a sub, in this case I gave them 100 hours for the consultant 1 labor category code, this will prevent you from getting invoiced for over that 100 hours of consultant 1 labor. The labor can also get recorded on a timesheet, and actually, if it gets processed, it automatically goes against the subcontract agreement and will create obligated and expended amounts against it. So if you have a lot of subcontract costs, great way to streamline that process. So then I promised the last element of cost, like Damon mentioned, was around indirect costs. So that comes from our cost pool setup. Again, setup based, it's simple or as complex as your business. There's 3 key steps to setting it up. So step 1 is I'm just defining my sequences. So the idea is, how this is different than some systems is you run your allocations across all pools, and then it's just going to go through the process. So it'll calculate my fringe from step 1, and I know in my demo example, some fringe goes into overhead company site, client site, and G&A. Some goes direct to project. So the key is your sequencing needs to be defined in a way that if you've got an intermediate pool or a service center, that needs to be in a sequence above the final pool that cost is used in. Step 2 is you're telling the system, how does that rate get calculated? So I'm telling the system I accumulate all my overhead costs for a certain group of departments. Then my base is my direct labor with fringe applied at actual from step 1 for that same department group. And then once I accumulate the cost, then I'm doing an allocation. So in this example, I'm taking that loaded cost and it's going out to projects at both an actual rate and a provisional rate. Then the system will track your provisional rate, and you've got that rate through time, both provisional and final. And then it's going to also track that actual rate. So you see that all throughout the system. When you run that allocation function, what you would do is just run your allocate cost function, choose the period you're running it for. If you're doing it for final rate, you can do that. You can also schedule that report for processing. And then what you're going to see is it's going to make entries against the general ledger and the project ledger. So I'm going to go over to my chart of accounts, and we'll pull that up. And what you'll see, I'm going to go down into my allocation accounts. You'll see for each allocation account, for each pool, there are 4 allocation accounts. And you can see they net down to 0. So I've got my overhead company site actual, provisional, and you can see that our overhead is running a little higher. If I drill into these amounts, it's going to actually show me the details of, what is that rate through time posted against job, task, department, and you see your amounts all the way over to the right. One of the nice things about the chart of accounts is you can also set filters on your chart of accounts. So, oops, I got my limit filter already there. I could tell the system I want to look at transactions just against one job, in this case 1002. So now you're seeing the details against just that job. And same idea, when I drill into this, it's going to show me the transactions just against that job. So that's my final element of cost, is my indirect cost. Let me go back to my cost pool setup for one last thing, which is people oftentimes, they see this little icon that says incurred cost schedule list. So I guess for the last 10 years, we've had an incurred cost function to build out the schedules. What we did with this latest version is we moved it inside of NAV, which has allowed it to become, really more powerful and easy for users to create. So it's got a whole function to create the incurred cost schedule, so it would take you through the creation of each schedule. And then once you complete it, what you'd end up having is your incurred cost schedules built out as financial reports inside of NAV. So it dynamically builds it for me. You would have the ability to look, at current period data and previous period data. The thing that's nice is it's building it through time, right? So I would see, as I go through the year, what is my incurred cost looking like there. And one of the things just to note is everything can get exported out to Excel, so the account schedules, in this case the financial reports, can also be pushed off to Excel. All right, so Damon, I've got one last poll I want to cover before I get to the last section. And really, I think to get an idea for the last 7 minutes, maybe do we have one about the things people are looking to improve, something like that?
Absolutely,
okay.
Paul. I just put it up there. So we've talked a lot about the innovation that's coming out with Microsoft Dynamics. And so the question here is just the main areas that you're looking for improvement within your company. Answer is integration with other systems, reporting information, automation of manual tasks, or the compliance. We've got some folks coming in here early, Paul. Let's kind of mix integration, reporting, and automation.
Give this a couple more minutes. Looks like we got about 53% have voted, so let's give them one more. Give them 10 more seconds here.
Okay.
So, but like you said,
get your answers in.
There you go.
But,
here they come. We're up to 70% now. But it looks like reporting and automation of manual tasks are by far I know compliance people, they need it, but that's expected, right? So that's like the baseline. So it looks like reporting and automation, and hopefully we've shown some of the automation. I know we've shown some of the reporting elements. I'm going to go into the invoicing piece, and then I'm just going to close out, because everybody talked about reporting. I'm going to close out with just one last step on reporting, and then if there's some questions, we'll be happy to cover those. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to open up that job that we talked about earlier. That this is a CPFF job. So when you run the invoicing function, this is like one area automation. We got feedback from clients through the years, and one of the things that they said was, we want a function that can create all the invoices at once, because what we used to require is that you run this create invoice function for each job. Now what we have is that we've got this billing group idea, and the thought here is that if you've got invoices that happen every month, and it's the same period of time for, let's say, every job in the company, I can create a billing group called monthly, and then when I run my invoices, I can run them for all jobs, choose monthly, and now it creates invoices for every job. So a good way to speed things up. I don't need, especially if you're invoicing, you've got clients that have hundreds and potentially 1,000 invoices a month. So that'll create all invoices. They create what they call invoice proposals, which is like a worksheet. Again, that workflow built into it, so you can send those out for approval, whether it's the PM or somebody else in the organization. And then once it becomes approved, it becomes a final document, which is a posted invoice. And then from here, like we mentioned about printing or emailing, you've got different options. So it automatically can use the last options and filters that you set. But the other option is on the job, you can set up a default. So every time I go to print an invoice for this job, we'll say, I want to show labor by category group, which means I want to put my direct labor with the subcontract labor. And maybe I don't want to show the people's names. I'm just going to put the resource labor category. I want to show inception to date. I'm going to roll it up. You can print cleanse on this thing. So I can print a hard copy. We'll just preview it. It makes more sense on a web demo. But what you'll see is the way that it displays it at level 1 with your labor by labor category code. I've got my other elements of cost, my fee. If I had withholding, I'd see that total for, in this case, I guess I printed it by task, so it's giving me a task total. And then I could also export it to Excel, Word, etc. let's reprint that, and I don't want a subtotal by task, and I want to send the resource name out there, and now when we preview this thing, now you're seeing a whole different view. And the great thing is that I can reprint it as many times as I want. I don't need to save it somewhere. I've always got access to it whenever I need it. And then for people, I was in a meeting yesterday, and I said, we can print it off on a 1034 and 1035, so your cover page as well as your detailed page. And his comment was, who uses a 1034 and 1035 anymore? And I let him know that there's still companies that use it, and there's still, I guess, contracting officers that want things printed on 1034 and 1035. But we've got a lot of invoice options. We've also got this integration with Word now. So if you wanted to, create some elements that are your own format, you can certainly do that. And then I'm going to just spend just the last couple minutes on Power BI. And then we'll just give ourselves a couple seconds for questions. Because one of the things I always get the question about is, how hard is this stuff? You're making it look easy. How hard is it for me to build something? So I just want to show people, if I wanted to build something, kind of what it looks like. So the first step is, I'm identifying what it is that I want to print. So I'm going to say, I want to look at things by resource name. So in my demo system, here are the different people in my demo system. And then I'm going to tell the system, okay, I want to see data from timesheets. So let's go ahead and click our timesheet. We'll say I want to see unposted time. So just a summary of unposted time. And then I also want to see, let's see how many hours that people have billed. So I'll check billed hours. And then maybe I want to see something about cost, right? So what was the total cost that has been incurred by person? And then let's flip it. I want to show it in this matrix view, because what I want to do is, if you want to see stuff and you want to see it by month, I'll just click month, and then I'm going to make that month as a column now, right? So it's showing me details about January, March, April, so I'm seeing that trended over time, and it was that simple for me to kind of build that. I can stretch it out if I wanted, and then like if I want to create another view underneath this, right, and I want to say that this is kind of numerical, which is great, but sometimes people want to see pictures, right? So I'm going to say that I want to look at let's do this by job now. So I'll say underneath, I'm going to say, let's look at the job description, and let's look at maybe total hours by job. So I'm going to go down to the job ledger, and we'll say just total hours by job, and let's make this into a pie chart, right? So now the thing that's neat is, like I mentioned, how these things are interactive. So when I click this project here, Acoustic Kitty, now what you're seeing is the people up above, these are their hours just for that job. So, it might have looked like, wow, I needed to have a special degree to build this stuff out, but you can see that Microsoft has made it where end users can now do things, and they continue to improve on this. The innovation with Power BI has been amazing, and if I look at the way that they initially wanted to deliver dashboards via Power Pivot and Excel, it feels so cumbersome now, and I feel like they're really hitting the spot. All right, so Damon, it looks like we've got about a minute left. So I'm going to just use this last minute to cover some questions. So let me just pull up the questions that people have had. And all right, so I got about 60 seconds. All right, so first question on here is, I guess because we have Deltek folks on the phone, do you have experience migrating companies off of Deltek CostPoint? And we do. We've done to date over 100 on both CostPoint products, GCS and CostPoint. I'd say the majority has probably been on GCS because people know GCS is getting sunsetted. But we've done over 100 there. question about migration of legacy data. Do you have tools to migrate our data? And we do. We've got, Microsoft's got what they call a rapid start tool. And it looks like I'm almost up on one last question on here. Is this available as a cloud or on-premise solution? And it certainly is. Microsoft is offering both the cloud and on-premise version of Dynamics NAV. The other questions we'll follow up with you guys. We can either follow up through email or we can call you. But I guess that closes it out. We really appreciate everybody's time today. If you have any other questions, we're going to send out a quick poll, I guess. You can also respond through email if you've got a question. But thank you for your time today, and have a wonderful afternoon.